All right, so if we're going to do an axonometric of this little shape, right, I tend to start always in the same place, right? So I like to identify the line that's right up in the front. It's the same way I do perspectives. So kind of keeping things sort of light and loose. You guys, the other thing that you'll see me like fooling around up here, you're going to see me move my body a ton because normally I would move the paper so that my stroke, because your stroke tends to be better kind of going away from you. And so I usually would rotate my paper so I'm going more right to left than up to back kind of thing. So you'll see me rotate a lot, which is goofy, but feel free to turn your page. Wow, I drew really dark on this. So I'm going to create just that front line. Fairly nice. I'm going to do this too. I'm going to draw way darker just so it shows up a little bit better. So I'm going to draw that front line. And then I'm just going to start kind of working my way around. The crazy thing is, as dumb as it was for me to have you draw tiny little cubes one day, like just one single block, that's all this is. It's a shape made up of smaller cubes, right? So I'm going to kind of pick a couple cubes. I'm going to pick this front two cubes and draw those first, right? Because then they become a reference point for everything else. So I know that if I'm drawing an axonometric, I've got an object that's set at anybody remember what angle it is? Typically 30-degree angle, right? You can do it steeper. You can do 45s and 60s. 60s kind of get wacky. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to really think about this like just one cube at a time. It'll help me do the proportions. So I'm going to draw this bottom cube. And remember, try and start practicing fairly, consistent solid strokes, right? So this isn't very square. So I'm going to come back and make it a little bit better. Again, try and not do that erasing thing. Then I'm going to add another cube up above it. And once I'm getting comfortable with the dimensions, proportions. All right, so there's the front. I am going to erase this though. That way out of line. So far, so good. All right, now from this upper cube, I know that I've got another cube going back this direction, right? I can actually see this cube coming off to the side. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that cube back like so. And then I've got another one off to this left side right there, so I can bring that back. Not bad, so far so good. And then I do see the top of this cube. And I see the top of this cube. Now my fingers are getting all red and blue. I can see the top of that cube, so I'm going to run that back over. And then this cube goes up one more row, so I can sketch in that top. Close, right? The great thing about line weights, too, is it lets you cheat. So I think it's pretty cube-like, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to darken some things up. And you notice that I kind of drew one cube at a time, but as I darken them in, as I create my object lines, I'm trying to use a single stroke, which makes it a lot straighter, or at least appear like I drew it straight. And for right now, until we get a better handle on line weights, we're going to kind of keep the line weights fairly simple and just go back in, and we're going to really just pop this thing off of the page is our goal for right now. I just broke this thing. Sorry, gotta look your way there. All right, so there my shape is like kind of popping out of the page a little bit more, right? But there's kind of some details that are a little funky, right? And this is where further line weights can help us a little bit. I want that big, what we call that. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a snap line. Mr. Yaros calls it a snap line. There's a bunch of different names for it. It's called a profile line. It's the profile of the object. It separates the object from the paper. That's not the only thing happening with the shape, though. If you look at the shape the way we've got it, this piece actually sits in front, right? It's kind of sitting up, but when you look at it the way I've drawn this, it's hard to tell. It kind of looks like it's the same object, right? So that's a place where we'd come back in and say, well, let's make that a little bit darker. Not as dark as our profile line necessarily, but just a little bit darker. And then it starts to separate that space from the space right next to it, right? And we could do the same thing and say, all right, well, these edges that are closest to us, those are going to be just a hair darker too, so that we create a better sense of the object. Not bad, right? Not too, it's not really too crazy, I hope.